much, Madam Speaker. The Alberta Party supports pipelines. They're the safest, most environmentally responsible means of transporting oil. The Kinder Morgan pipeline is good for Alberta, it is good for BC, it is good for Canada, and it is good for the environment, because by getting more Alberta crude to market, we displace more barrels of higher carbon crude that come from other jurisdictions, most notably Venezuela and Nigeria. This is a fact that Alberta's NDP have not bothered to make known to our friends in British Columbia or to the rest of the world. It is one of the many, many, many ways that the Alberta NDP have let down the people of Alberta on this file and so many others, which is why I and the Alberta Party are incredibly frustrated. The NDP have been whistling past the graveyard, while a vocal minority of people have started marshalling their forces against this project. And this goes back years. This is not a recent thing. This goes back years. This government, this Alberta NDP government, has done on the Kinder Morgan file what they do on everything else. They've crossed their fingers and simply hoped everything goes well. Well, it hasn't gone well, Madam Speaker. It hasn't gone well. And when I think about the situation with Kinder Morgan, I think about what happens in other parts of this country. When Bombardier proposes to build a factory in Quebec to build airplanes or snowmobiles, well, no one says anything. The factory gets proposed, the factory gets built, things go into production. When a car factory in southern Ontario is proposed, it is only seen as a good thing. Oh, but there probably is some federal and provincial subsidy money that ends up going to those factories as well. They're celebrated for the jobs they create, for the economic activity they're creating. But what do the products that those factories, what do those products consume? How do you make those products go? How do you make an airplane fly? How do you make a snowmobile go? What do you pour into the gas tank of a car? It's oil and gas. These are the things that this dissonance, this disconnect between the supply side, which is what we're focusing on here, and the demand side. Seems okay that we can build these things in eastern Canada, but the province that produces the oil and gas to make these things go, well, we're apparently the ones who are to blame for all the problems. And that is not to mention the obvious and gross hypocrisy from provinces that would dump millions of litres of raw sewage off of Montreal or Victoria, who claim to care about the environment, but will only fight against Alberta's projects that are to the benefit of their neighbours and clearly in the national interest. So it is profoundly frustrating, and it is shameful that Alberta's NDP have let it get to this point. It is on this government that we have been allowed to get to this point. It is on you. You could have done more, you should have done more, and you didn't. And here we are. So now they're proposing to backstop the pipeline with Alberta taxpayer dollars. Pretty remarkable. They don't seem to be very good negotiators, because in any negotiation I've been in, the first thing you do is not offer money. But here we are. We seem to be through the looking glass on this. Now, one school of thought is that one of the reasons the NDP may want to take an equity stake in this pipeline is to have standing in court to sue the government when the pipeline fails, sue the government in BC for damages when the pipeline fails. Well, that presumes that the pipeline's going to fail. It makes me wonder if they know something that the rest of Alberta doesn't know. But if we're going to put Alberta taxpayer money into this project, we should absolutely demand that the federal government make an equal or greater investment in the project as well. So the federal government can finally, once and for all, put their money where their mouth is. Because all we've heard from the federal government are empty platitudes, words. No action, just words. I like the words that they're saying, I just don't believe them. We need the NDP government here in Alberta to stand up for the province of Alberta, to lean hard on the federal government to do their job, to make sure this pipeline gets built, and to heaven forbid, actually follow the rule of law. This project was vetted and reviewed over and over and over again. Stakeholders were consulted. Indigenous peoples were consulted all along the route. People have been consulted, the environmental impacts have been studied, the spill response has been considered in the coastal waters off of BC. And I'll note that the pipeline that's been in operation for 62 years has had no spills in the Pacific Ocean. Those tankers have been traveling through those waters without GPS, without double-hulled tankers, without the technology that we have available to us today, with no incidents. So the simple fact is the risks to the marine environment in BC are negligible. But the people of British Columbia have been told that the risks are imminent, that the minute this pipeline goes into production, that's it for the fishery, that's it for tourism, because disaster will abound. Well, it simply isn't true, Madam Speaker. It is simply not true. But this government has not been near forceful enough in making that factual case to the people in British Columbia, not talking about how we are aligned with the people of British Columbia and their desire to address climate change, that this pipeline will help address climate change by reducing the carbon footprint of crude oil that is consumed by the growing demand around the world. Those are the cases that need to be made. You know, the Minister of Environment in her comments said that this project is in the national interest, but at the same time, they won't compel the federal government, they won't lean on the federal government to ensure that if Alberta is going to be making an investment in the pipeline, that the federal government make an investment in the pipeline. Well, if this project is in the national interest, the federal government should also step up, put their money where their mouth is, not just empty rhetoric, put their money where their mouth is. And taking a stake in this project, it also raises another troubling question. Does this mean that any energy project in this province of any size is going to require government intervention, going to require a government investment? Well, maybe that's what this government, this NDP government, has wanted all along. Maybe they want the government to be investing in crown corporations and developing oil and gas and not allowing the private sector to do what it does best, and that is to invest, not creating an attractive investment climate, actively pushing away investment because they want a government-first model. Is that actually what's going on here? Because that is a substantial risk that I see. In the banking world, they call it moral hazard. It's the too-big-to-fail problem. Why would private investors put their money up when the government's going to do it for them? That's a huge concern of mine, Madam Speaker. Now, I believe that Alberta needs to do whatever is necessary to see this pipeline put into operation. And unfortunately, the NDP have put us as a province in a position where we may have no choice but to invest in this pipeline. And if that's the way it needs to be, then so be it, because it is absolutely in the interests of the province of Alberta to see this pipeline built. And let me be as clear as I can be. The Alberta Party wants the Kinder Morgan pipeline to succeed, because it is in the interest of not only the people of Alberta, but it's also in the financial interest of the people of British Columbia, and in the interest of the environment, and in the interests of our entire country. And that is a case that has not been made strongly enough. So the Alberta Party wants to see this pipeline succeed. But we also want to see the Alberta NDP stand up to the federal government, and especially stand up to their comrades in the British Columbia NDP. They have not done enough to advocate for this pipeline. It must get built. But if it does eventually get built, it will be done in spite of what the Alberta NDP have done, not because. Thank you.